that's a tough one. All right, you're good. So,
That's right? All right, well, good morning, everybody. We'll get started in about a minute. If you hadn't had an opportunity to grab your coffee or a donut or another donut, definitely do that. Good morning, everybody. My name is Joel Viterna. I'm the president of the Lewisburg Chamber of Commerce. Welcome and thank you so much for coming out this morning. We've also got the live stream link at the Lewisburg Chamber of Commerce, so we are live streaming everything this morning. Thank you to the middle school for setting us up and USB for sharing this facility today. It's the same live stream that you can watch middle school basketball on or high school basketball on. So pretty cool there. We definitely want to thank our sponsors, First National Bank, First Option, and Landmark National Bank. We have Mark Williams here today and Julie Ballman here today from First Option and Landmark. And before we get too much further, I'd like to go ahead, we got a few people coming in. I'd like to go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll get started. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the Next, I'd like to introduce Raymond McClanahan, our Senior Vice President of Landmark National Bank. He also said head janitor. He was sweeping the gyms this morning for basketball this afternoon, so I appreciate that. Thanks again for helping us again. I'd like to turn this over to you. I believe we're pushing 30 plus years now of the legislative breakfast year after year. So thank you all. Thank you.
Well, thank you everybody for letting me continue to moderate. So I guess the sign of the job well done is that at least ask you to come back again. So welcome to our legislators. Thank you for being with us today. I just wanted to briefly start off by introducing each one and then giving you guys 3 to 5 minutes or so to just say some opening remarks if you'd like to do that. Joining us today is Senator Molly Baumgartner, Senator Karen Tyson, and also Representative Samantha Potter. I think I got it right. So, Molly, would you like to start off?
There we go. Good morning. I'm going to just start off with Go Chiefs because that's what this weekend is about. I know there's a lot of focus on that. But I do want to thank all of you for attending, particularly those that will be watching. It's a privilege to serve as Senator for the 7th District. My 7th District as a state senator. I want to thank First Option Bank, obviously the Chamber of Commerce of Lewisburg, First National Landmark Bank for hosting this because it's important for us to have that opportunity to share, to quiz us when we're right in the throes of legislative session. I started my 5th year as chair of Senate Education. We meet every single day during the week at 1:30. I'm also serving on the Health Committee that starts at 8:30 in the morning. I'm on taxation assessment, which Senator Tyson chairs. Wasn't on that last year, but I'm really thankful to be able to circle back and on that. I also serve on judiciary. And I'll tell you that this legislative session started with spots and sputters because we are doing exactly what the school districts in Miami County have been doing is we've been working as legislators to adapt to what is the new norm of a pandemic with COVID. And so when we enter the building, there are signs everywhere to wear masks. We have to stop once we get past the guards, and we do a temperature check. And then we make sure that we have all those precautions when we are working, doing our business in our committee hearings. The interesting thing is that we do know that the state's always been behind as far as technology. And just like school districts, for our state agencies to stay up to date with technology, if you don't stay on top of it, you're going to fall way behind very quickly. So a concerted effort was made so that all committee hearings are live streamed, so that folks that are testifying can do so via WebEx. That's a version different from Zoom. WebEx has sometimes been working really well for us, but other times not so well. One of the disadvantages is the burden that's placed on our committee chairs to make sure that all of the testimony, the links for WebEx, that everything are up and ready in time, and that's been it's been a challenge, but we think that we're getting there. It also means that the Senate, I'm not going to speak to the House because I know that Representative Potter will address that, but it does mean that the Senate is not on the Senate floor as often per week. And so when we're on the floor, it's because we're going to be working bills. The bills are read in each day. It's been a slower process to get bills to committee and read into the floor. So some bills that we wanted to be working on, haven't been assigned bill numbers yet because our advisors are working on a closed door system. So where we used to go down and meet with them, come up with that language and work on it together, their door is closed, and so we're relying on just phone calls to get that work done. I'm going to stop right there because I know we have lots of questions to address and pass it on.
Okay. But first of all, I want to thank First Option Bank, First National Bank, and Landmark Bank for sponsoring and for the Chamber for hosting and for everyone who is in attendance, whether it's online or in person. First, I wanted to address the precautions that we're taking within the Capitol, specifically in the House, when it comes to COVID. Masks are recommended. I would say about 95% of House members are wearing masks on a regular basis. We have social distancing both in committee and on the floor, and the social distancing on the floor is expanded up to the gallery, so we're all at least 6 feet apart with our sit. And then hand sanitizer and everything is around. And then I think we also did a vaccine rollout this week to get everybody, mostly the committee assistants, everybody who is concerned vaccine, they don't have to worry about anything. Then let's see, this is my first year, obviously. I was thrown into the middle of a completely odd year where there isn't very much communication. Well, there's communication, but not in-person communication, which makes it hard to get to know everybody, but we're really working on trying to get that done. I'm in Fed and State, Corrections, Juvenile Justice, and Taxation. All three of those meet every single day, and we have a load of work that we are working on when it comes to either property tax transparency, and a bunch of other issues. We've passed by both with the supermajority, both in the House and Senate. We have been working on unemployment fraud this week and addressing that issue, which I also happen to have. If anybody was a victim of unemployment fraud, I have some affidavits for you guys to fill out and send in if you'd like. And then additionally, I'm the co-chair of the Freshman Caucus, which is a pretty big deal. There's about 20 freshman Republicans, and we are working together to get our constituents on board, and we'll communicate with our constituents to make sure the bills are passed accordingly. And then I will go ahead and hand it off to Karen. Thank you.
Hold down on the power button.
Okay. I should have done the mic check before. Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to see you here. And for those online, thank you for joining us. As always, thank you to our sponsors. These things don't just happen. It takes a little bit of work and effort. We do miss the crisp cakes this morning, but we are glad for the donuts. So thank you guys very much. It's been an interesting year. We hit the ground running. I have done that since I've been the tax chairman in the Senate. I don't think there's any sense to wait that first week to get our work completed, and this year was no different. We were a little bit more aggressive this year, though. We pre-filed a bill with co-sponsors on it that would be tax transparency. And so we were able to have that hearing the first week and kick it out of the Senate within the first 2 weeks. And so it's in the House Tax Committee now. We also passed value of both the House and the Senate. And if you guys aren't aware of it, that is the resolution that would allow for the opportunity for voters to vote on a constitutional amendment to decide whether the court has the authority to decide abortion laws or whether that authority lies with the legislature. That authority lies with the legislature. Our court should not be legislating from the bench. And so I hope that you realize when you go to vote in August 2022 that you realize this is more, it is about abortion, but it's about the structure of our government. Who has the authority to legislate? We have a rogue court. They've been legislating from the bench for years. In fact, in their opinion of the Zimmerman abortion case, they even state that they are not a rogue court and that it is our honest in doing our work. If you have to use those words, then there's obviously a problem in the court opinion. But I recommend that you go read it and that before you make your decision on that vote, it's going to be critical and we need everybody engaged to get that passed in August 2022. Also, we had the emergency powers for the governor, and it was an extension of those powers. I was one of the few that voted against that. To me, yes, we needed some of the legislation in that bill, but that could have been broken out and treated as a separate bill. Instead, we just extended the authority that we've been complaining about for months with our governor, and I just wasn't willing to go there. So it did pass, and it is in place, and it expires the end of March. So we will be dealing with that issue, and hopefully the committees will be picking those issues up now. In fact, we should have been picking them up all along. So I hope that doesn't get kicked down, the can doesn't kick down the road. I do sit on tax, transportation, commerce, legislative post audit. I'm excited to be on that committee. One of the audits that I am requesting, for those of you that may not know, Zuckerberg money came to Kansas. I don't know if you've been following the national elections and the influence, but that money was used in Kansas also. So we need to make sure that our elections are protected and the integrity of our ballot, and I think every one of us can agree on that. I also sit on rules and regs and a few other tasks before me as a legislator, and I look forward to your questions.
I always kind of start these sessions off with, it seems like there's never anything to talk about, and then inevitably, we find something to last the whole hour. So I do thank you guys for your time here. It's greatly appreciated, and I know it's both time and commitment as well. You've already touched on quite a few of the issues that we have questions received. The public was able to submit questions to the Chamber of Commerce by email in advance if they weren't able to attend. Likewise, I would encourage anybody who's here in attendance, if you have a question and you'd like to have one of the legislators ask it, go ahead and write it down. You should have a pen or a paper, write it down, and then somebody will come by and pick it up during the hearing. But the first question I wanted to start off with, I'm actually going to address it to Senator Tyson. As you guys would like to discuss it, feel free to. But Senator Tyson, you touched on taxation transparency. And so one of the questions that we've received is, has any of the legislature figured the expense of both printing and mailing the notices for the new tax bill that will be required? And then also any other comments specific, because we've got quite a few questions regarding taxation transparency. Address those.
Yes, yes, we have looked at that. I had an estimate from Salina from last year on what their printing and postage would cost. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but for a majority of people, say $1 per each voter or each property owner. And I would ask this group too, how many of you would pay $1 more in your property taxes in order to get a notice? And what this does is we have a shell game with our property taxes. The valuations go up, and then the governing body may or may not increase the mill levy. They may even lower it, but we're writing a bigger check. And so what this transparency bill does is the governing body would have to vote as to whether they accept or are going to increase your property taxes that year. That way it would just be transparent. It wouldn't be an automatic increase in valuations. It's modeled after several states, most notably Utah, Tennessee, Minnesota. Other states have been doing this for 30 years, some of them for 40 years. It's a program that works. It just is, we are about taxation with representation. So there's a notice that will be mailed to each property owner, and they will know the amount for them. And then there's a time and a date of we call it a truth in taxation hearing, because that's what Kansas tax law is currently stated as, truth in taxation. So not all law, but this portion of it. And it just expands on that truth in taxation. So that way the public can go and comment at the meeting, and the local governments can hear. They have to vote at that meeting, but they can take input prior to that meeting too. There's nothing that limits it. It's very flexible, and it has worked in other states. I know that it's change, a big change. And so that stretches your comfort zone and others' comfort zone. But I think it's a change that Kansas needs. In fact, I know it is a change that we need. Because if we look at our property taxes, we've gone up approximately 154% statewide over the last 20 years. I mean, you can tell there's people that are being taxed out of their homes, literally. And some people are paying more in their property tax now than they paid on their original mortgage.
Where is that as far as the process? I mean, I know it's been introduced.
I was a co-sponsor, yes, Senator Baumgartner was a co-sponsor. The Senate Tax Committee had a hearing the first week, passed it. The Senate, if you don't think this is good legislation, the Senate passed it 34-1. One senator voted no.
The House now.
It's in the House Tax Committee now. They've had a hearing. Hopefully they'll be working it soon. We had a little bit of a glitch in the House Tax Committee. An unexpected lobbyist showed up and asked for all health clubs to be exempt from property tax.
It is going to be worked this week in the House tax. There have been some suggestions. I don't know if they're going to pass or not, but my goal is that we don't add any amendments that will end up killing the bill, because in my opinion that this is extremely important, because that notice that's sent to you has a breakdown specifically of where each percentage is going to. It gives you the percentage and the dollar amount per mill, and whether it's going to the counties or libraries or whatever it is at that time. One other thing I'd like to point out is that, well, initially, yes, it is a mailing that will cost a little more. But in my opinion, it's worth your ability to go and talk to the commissioners and stay there and watch how they vote. You know where they stand on the issues that are extremely important to you. And additionally, you do have the ability to request to receive it by email, which will shortly, I guess, is within the next 5 years, cut down on the mailing cost.
As it stands today, is it something that you're
Yes.
you've obviously been a part of it as well, so I don't know how much you have.
Well, I have been a part of it, and I do want those of you that are attending and those that are watching to know I did not vote on that bill. My husband was in the hospital, he had a heart attack, and I was there at the hospital with him. I felt I was where I needed to be for that day. Now, we did vote on it last year, and I was in favor of it, did vote for it. And as Miami Countyans, I think what's important to know is that there were very lengthy hearings last year on this particular piece of transparency legislation, and we had our hearings this year as well. We did not have any opposition from the county this year. In fact, a couple of the commissioners encouraged us to support the transparency bill. I think it is important to know, because one of the things that did come up in the hearing was the concern, well, how come school districts, how come community colleges, how come they're not being included in what gets mailed out? Quite frankly, we can do that. There was not a request for that during the hearing, nor was there any amendment brought to us. But I do want to explain a little bit of a difference as far as community colleges. We have 19 colleges in the state. They are governed by each community college has a board of trustees. I happen to serve for 18 years as a trustee at Johnson County Community College. All of those community colleges are a taxing entity for their county. The only exception is Cowley County, down just south of Wichita, and they have added a county that neighbors them, and so they are bringing in taxes. But for the community colleges, the taxing body is the county where the community college resides. And as a trustee, when we had our budget hearings, there was always that question, well, wait a minute, we don't know what the assessed valuation is, so what is the value of the property in the county yet? So we might choose to set the value at, we might choose to set the mill levy at 5 mills. But we didn't know yet what the assessed valuation was. By law, if we set it at 5 mills, that really had nothing to do, because we were setting the budget for how much money would be generated from the 5 mills. And in fact, if the valuation went up, which was the case every year, it was what we actually received was what the dollar amount was. So it may turn out that after that valuation, after that assessment occurred, it really was only 4.7 mils. So it always had that protected, because we were basing the budget on what the revenue would be from the mills. That isn't the case with our other governing bodies. And so that's why this transparency bill, I believe, is so important. Thank you.
Kind of, you know, the budget question and the mill question obviously leads to some other ones. We've got several questions related to the governor's submitted budget that includes a $1.9 billion increase in taxes. And so, obviously, that's a big number. The other things that are included in some of the questions that we've received is especially the impact that the proposed budget has on Cape. And so, Senator Baumgartner, I don't know if you'd like to address the taxing.
Absolutely. I have to tell you that when the governor came out with her budget, probably a good thing that her state address was where she was alone in the room with the camera, because I can imagine that had the House and the Senate been convened together, as is the tradition pre-COVID, to hear that, it would not have been well received. When as a governor in March, you essentially shut down our state think of all the jobs that have been lost. Think of the businesses that have closed. If you venture outside of this county, you're going to see building after building closed as a result of the shutdown that our governor imposed. So at the time that folks are out of jobs, they still aren't getting their unemployment payments, that is not the time to burden them. We already are in, I believe it's now the top 5 as far as the highest taxing state in the United States. That's not a list I'm proud for us to be on. An additional $1.9 billion is absolutely unacceptable. To then put that on the shoulders of our CAPERS program, we have worked long and hard. It has been almost 10 years that the legislature has worked to undo, to unravel the damage that was done by the Sebelius administration and the Parkinson administration. Because what they did is year in and year out, to make their budgets, they didn't make the CAPERS payment. We were almost in the red zone, almost ready to be, CAPERS was almost ready to be bankrupt. And the fact of the matter is, in our state, 1 out of every 10 residents, 1 out of every 10 in our state population is either actively contributing to CAPERS or is receiving CAPERS. And so to use that as our ATM and to re-amateurize it is not a good practice, because we will not be able to dig out of that hole. I know that in the past people have been concerned about their CAPERS. They've been concerned about what's going to happen to our state. One of the worst things that could occur, in my mind, is if we can't keep CAPERS solvent. We, for the first time 2 years ago, got the largest portion of CAPERS, which is education. We got them out of the red zone, and we are moving toward the green zone. Now is not the time to backtrack on that. It's the time to do what we do at home, and that's we tighten our belt and we wait until things have settled down. And we can't afford the things that we want. We have to focus on what it is that we need in our state, not just our wants.
But, so you obviously lead the charge to address that, I'm hoping.
Yes, and I will be a strong no.
Representative Clark, any comment regarding the budget?
When it comes down to it, I would tax increase, and especially this year we're facing the issue of tax issue because businesses that have been forced to shut down can't pay their property tax, which we actually have a bill that would be allowing payment plan for that and a couple other possible pieces of legislation. And I think that's what we'll address, is ensure we get our businesses back going, get people back working, fix our employment issues, and tighten the belt where we need to, and not raise taxes on people that are hurting right now.
Senator Tyson, along Representative Potter touched on it. I find it interesting, and I assume everybody in this room would as well. I find it interesting that when the legislature has to propose a payment plan option for citizens that maybe taxes are needed to address, but at the same time we have fiscal issues within these entities. I mean, how do we balance the obviously the needs that the governor's seen, the $1.9 billion need, the issues that we're addressing in the paper, at the same time making sure that we have the ability to adequately pay the taxes?
We have a tax and spend government. She just wants to tax and spend. She's increasing over and over. And I've said this, I went to her when she was first elected and asked for a Women Commission study on tax. Deep dive. It has not happened since Governor Graves, and we needed it. Instead, she formed a committee that put like minds of tax and spend, even former legislators. In fact, a couple of them voted for the largest tax increase ever in the state of Kansas. That's not who I want deciding how we're taxing our citizens. So, and we need to do a deep dive. That's how we got the property tax transfer. We did a deep dive on property tax. That's just a piece of the legislation that came up There's actually 4 major pieces to that bill. And then we've got 2 other bills that are coming as a result of that deep dive. But we need to ask ourselves, what are wants and what are needs? And we need to get serious about that conversation. And that would help. We just can't keep taxing citizens. I know we're number 3 in the nation for senior citizens in high taxes. We're one of the top 2 on sales tax on food. We're in the top 10 for sales tax. For vehicle, property tax, we're some of the top in the nation. Property taxes, we have a $1 million building in Iola, Kansas, a commercial rural building taxed at $52,000 a year. A $1 million building, very similar in Utah, Kansas, that same building taxed at $16,000 a year. In less than 20 years, you're going to pay for that building in taxes in Kansas. And we have all these incentive programs that they talk about for businesses. And you know what? Get a fair and level playing field. People will want to come to Kansas. That's what we need.
I've joked about it before in previous sessions where we've all been together, but I think the issue continues to come up from legislative sponsors, but also I think just in the general public. And one of the issues that keeps coming up is medical marijuana and whether or not we can have that in Kansas. Well, I'll moderate first. Thank you. But, it's an ongoing question amongst the citizens of the state. Is it time? Are we at that place? Or is it from just a societal instance where we need to continue to have a ban? There's, I'm a banker. There's obviously federal implications that we're all struggling with as well. And so, we're at a time when we're facing budget shortfalls and fiscal issues. We have, to our neighbor in Colorado, an example where they passed medical marijuana, taxed it. No pun intended, the green kept flowing in like crazy. So, Senator Tyson, with some of the issues that we have, should we be looking for other revenue sources? One of those, medical marijuana with potential tax.
We absolutely should be smart about how we're taxing and where we're taxing, and we do need to have that conversation. I'll paraphrase de Tocqueville, I'll butcher it a little, but he said that America will succeed as long as we have good people and ethical people. And the problem is we are facing a constitutional, we are being challenged in this country. And this is a great example. We have a federal law that outlaws marijuana, but we have states that have chosen to make it legal. So we absolutely need to deal with this issue at the federal level and then allow the states. It should have never been, the feds have overreached for years, and this is just another example of federal government. Let the states decide, but we have to address it at the federal level. Otherwise, as you said, what doesn't get talked about in these states that have gone ahead and quote unquote made it legal, that they're blatantly disregarding federal law. They can't use banks because of it, because you wouldn't be compliant with federal law. I mean, the ramification is important that we understand when we're creating legislation in Kansas.
This is one of those issues that everyone has strong feelings on one side or the other. And I think the biggest issue is when it comes to the federal aspect of it, how to implement it, and also if Kansas allows it to be grown and manufactured, because we would have the Commerce Clause issue as well if we allowed it in from other states. But I will tell you that we do have a bill coming up in one of my committees, and it's not one that has to do with Medicaid expansion. But what it would do is legalize for medicinal purposes. It would allow the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to create that list, and you'd have to have a prescription from your doctor. It would not allow for actual for the plant itself to be smoked, but it would allow for gummies, vaping of it, and the creams. So now talking to the chair of the committee on that the other day, and as written currently, I would support that.
Thank you for the question. The interesting thing is 6 years ago when I was serving on corrections and juvenile justice, that's the first hearing that I participated in with regard to medical marijuana. And, you know, the issues haven't changed in the course of, here we are, 7 years later, the issues haven't changed. First thing that came up in testimony was, this is not FDA approved. It is not FDA researched. I think you guys know that it was just this last year that the FDA began the research on CBD. So that is always the basis. If we're going to prescribe, it should be FDA approved. In the United States, we did not begin to administer vaccinations for COVID until it had gone through FDA. It was a rushed approval process, but it was approved by FDA. I want us to think about the state of Kansas. And farming is king in the state of Kansas. That means we've got a lot of trucking that goes on to move the grain. We have the intermodal that's in Edgerton, the third largest intermodal in the United States. And what we do know is the states that have approved marijuana or medical marijuana, their biggest issue, their biggest problem is not being able to hire people that can pass the drug test. In fact, what they have in their state, at the Quick Trips, at the Casey's, and so forth, is you can purchase urine that you can use for your next drug test. So I don't think that Kansas wants to be in the business of being a drug dealer. We heard from law enforcement. Again, we pivot to the West, and what Colorado has dealt with is a significant spike in not only serious car accidents, but in violent crime. They track that specifically to when marijuana was legal. We heard from the medical community. You know, the Children's Mercy Hospital is known throughout the Midwest. People come from all of other states to Children's Mercy for treatment, and we heard testimony from that hospital. Their physicians would not prescribe. We heard from other hospitals that they would not prescribe either. What we also learned is when you bring in medical marijuana, it is not your family physician that will give you that prescription. It's going to be someone that comes in from out of state and sets up in a hotel room or in a storefront. So this is not going to be someone that's prescribing that knows the complete medical history of that individual. It's opportunists that come in. So until we get that FDA research and approval, and until we hear from law enforcement and from our medical community that they support that and that they can regulate that, I will not be supporting medical marijuana. Thank you.
I've often said that there is in the United States of America, there's a plethora of ways to make money, and now I've learned enough. I didn't know that was possible. Mr. Baumgartner, you touched on it briefly in your comments, and that was the Edgerton Intermodal. One of the questions that we received really is an environmental question wrapped around that, which is what are the pollution risks for the Hillsdale Lake watershed generated by the intermodal, and is that something from a legislative perspective that we should look at?
Thanks for that question. That's one of several issues of concern that folks have reached out to me about with regard to the intermodal. There is tremendous concern about there being pollution to that watershed, and so that's one of the things that we have reached out to the county. They need to go out and need to be inspecting that. The other concern that I've heard, in fact, I did go and speak at a forum for the public, and that is, so we started with the intermodal, and North Point continues to expand that intermodal. And It isn't that North Point goes and asks a farmer or a resident, would you like to sell me your property? What they have done is they hire individuals to come up with phony or facade LLC, and they approach the homeowner that might have a tract of land, 10 or 15 acres, and they will say, I'm a cattle farmer, I'm looking at additional land for my cattle. And so the person that owns that tract sees that it's going to remain farmland, and they enter into an agreement and they sell that property, and the day that it is sold, the deed is transferred over to North Point. A whole group of individuals were concerned because it was December 23rd, the evening of December 23rd, when Edgerton hammered in the little yellow sign saying that we're going to have a meeting, and it was so that they could meet the prior notice, but we're going to have a meeting on rezoning. So I had two couples that reached out to me. They've been in their property for less than a month when this rezoning process began, and they anticipate, because of the approval of the rezoning, that within the next year they will have a large, up to 1,000,000 square foot building across the street from them, and they have no recourse. So the valuation of their property, they'll never be able to sell it. They'll never get to realize that. So there are issues with regard to the intermodal, but I have been contacted specifically about that runoff, and we need the Miami County Commissioners to be on board, but we also need the Johnson County Commissioners to be on board and to help resolve that issue.
Well, Representative Potter, I had one for you actually. You kind of raised it in one of your comments, and that was regarding Medicare expansion in Kansas. So, there's obviously it's a two-sided issue. There's a lot of concerns about that. I'm interested in your thoughts about, excuse me, Medicaid expansion.
I think that there are other ways that we have the opportunity to address the issue, specifically with rural hospitals and taking care of fellow Kansans without expanding Medicaid. I know that we have a bill out that will allow rural hospitals right now to become emergency hospitals, like up in Overland Park, you see the smaller hospitals that don't have any overnight beds. They're all just outpatient stuff. So that would allow the hospitals to stay open, get more federal money, because that was actually part of the one of the federal aid plans with COVID, which actually gave us the ability to even get to this point. And I think there are other measures that we can take that would not force us to create more taxes and cause more of a negative budget while still being able to help our fellow Kansans in rural hospitals.
Thank you. Let's be clear. Medicaid expansion is a term for Obamacare, for KenCare expansion, a system that a majority of people did not like, was not working, has a third-party contractor out of state managing our health care in Kansas, and that would be expansion of that program. We can't afford what has been proposed. I've always said if we would get a targeted solution, and it sounds like there may be a bill in the House from what Representative Potter said that might be able to help us in that effort, but we need it targeted. We need it after specific, especially with what's going on now with COVID. Mental health issues, we know this with Osawatomie State Hospital. This governor, it's disappointing this administration has not made it the priority that they said they would. In fact, they were not on the list to get vaccines. And locals reached out to me. I was able to reach out to the administration, and they did listen, and they did act quickly once they realized that oversight had happened. So I do appreciate that, and I appreciate that effort. But I also have been pushing for a couple of years now, I'm starting to do it publicly, lift the moratorium on Osawatomie State Hospital. I was told last week that within a week or two, the governor will be proposing a bill on lifting that moratorium. That needs to go away.
You might expand on what that one.
The moratorium is a cap on the number of beds, and it has lowered the availability of beds at Osawatomie State Hospital. Even though the beds exist, they cannot be used because of the moratorium. And local law enforcement know this more than anyone, that this is a major issue. They have to maintain people that they do not have the capacity for. They need a mental health facility, and it just snowballs and impacts our local governments. It needs to be addressed.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about Medicaid expansion. And the fact of the matter is, when we were having hearings last year and the year before, we are unable to have an honest discussion about Medicaid and about the state of our hospitals and healthcare services within our state. Over 2 weeks ago, legislators received an email saying 47 rural hospitals at an immediate danger of closing. I went to the Senate President and said, "Did you get this?" I did. I said, "What's the list of the 47 hospitals?" And he fired out an email and made that request. A week later, still didn't have the list. So in the Public Health Committee, the committee did make a request for the Hospital Association to let us know what are the 47 hospitals that are in immediate danger, and tell us, is it weeks, months, what does immediate mean? Still haven't gotten that list. And here's the fact of the matter. Kansas Hospital Association is doing nothing to address the facts and the reality of what's happening with our hospitals in this state. They did finally in testimony admit last year that Medicaid expansion would not have saved any of the hospitals that have closed in prior years, and it would not save any other rural hospitals in the future from closure. The fact of the matter is we have rural hospitals that might only have 0, 1, 2, or 3 patients in it for a daily census. You cannot keep a hospital open if you have that small of a census. So we need to have the Hospital Association come together with some solutions. But I also want to go back to, what is it that the governor's really wanting to do? She's not saying, let's make it legal to sell medical marijuana in the state because that might be helpful for veterans with PTSD, or it might possibly address other medical issues. She's saying, let's start selling marijuana so that we can fund expansion. And if you go back and look at her statements over the years, from when she was a senator to now during her term as a governor, the number of people that she wants to expand Medicaid for keeps growing. Started out as 100,000, then it was 120, then 125, then 135. The statement I heard last week on the radio is she wants to expand it to 165,000.
Well, along that lines, is that an issue of the population size that would have originally been inclusive in that original number growing, or is that an issue of we moved the goalposts?
It's an issue, I would say, that one, we're moving the goalposts, and two, the issue of Medicaid expansion. One of the things that was debated on the Senate floor is, what are we doing for the folks that are already on Medicaid, that are already receiving care services? And we know that we have a significant list of ID and DD population that are not receiving services. They're referred to as being on the wait list. And it was a position taken by your Kansas Senate that we're not expanding anything until we address the needs of those on the wait list. The other issue, I introduced the bill, we have 3 different providers in CanCare. And any child that's put in foster care immediately is given a card from one of those providers for Medicaid. And yet, these kids are shifted around maybe as much as 9 times per year into different foster care homes. And every time they are moved, they run the risk of being in a different area with a different Medicaid card. And so my proposal was, first of all, if you're a foster child and you are receiving benefits from Medicaid, it shouldn't be a for-profit organization that's overseeing our most vulnerable kids. So my proposal was it needed to be all foster kids were in one Medicaid coverage so that their information would travel with them as they were being moved throughout the state, but also that it had to be a not-for-profit organization that was overseeing these for those kids.
You touched on children in foster care, and I had this a little bit farther down my stack of stuff, but I'm also going to preface this with I'm not an expert in this field, but my understanding is that there's currently legislation before either the Senate or the House to address the reporting of deaths of children in foster care. Apparently, as I understand it, that isn't, if a social worker or somebody is aware of that, it cannot be reported to law enforcement. Is that correct?
Social worker is bound to report immediately. What we have is there are concerns of cover-ups. There are concerns that the agency, which is DCF, that oversees foster care, that they are not being transparent about the atrocities that are occurring to kids. We're not talking just deaths. I was contacted by a reporter that said that he was made aware by a whistleblower that there was a child in foster care and that there was a caseworker in St. Francis, which is one of the groups that's contracted to provide services, and that the foster child was picked up from the foster home and transported to see a kinship visit. And somewhere, either on the way to or the way from, that individual had them spend a night at a hotel, and horrendous things were done to that child by that social worker. And that when DCF was finally eventually notified, there is no record as to whether charges were pressed against that individual. And the allegations are that multiple crimes were committed. There is no tracking, no transparency as to whether that individual was still even employed anywhere within this state or outside of the state. So we have tremendous problems of lack of reporting. I think most of you are familiar with the young toddler in Kansas City, Kansas, that it was alleged that her father and father's girlfriend had killed this little toddler, and grandparents had contacted not only law enforcement but DCF. We have asked for that information from DCF, and it is still under internal investigation. So I am working on that bill. It is to create an Office of Child Advocacy, whereby whistleblowers can call in, and problems with regard to reporting and legal action being taken against wrongdoers would be handled. And we want it to be under the Attorney General's office. We don't want it to be political. The governor wants it under one of her agencies, the administration agency, where she gets to handpick who oversees that agency and who oversees that office. And we don't need the fox tending the chicken. We need independence, we need confidentiality, and we need folks that are attorneys that are addressing the very issues of the mistreatment of our kids in foster care.
Thank you. That's for sure. Senator Carter, I have a question for you. One of the things, one of the questions that we had came up in regards to rural opportunity zones. And as the question is written, Miami County is not currently designated as a rural opportunity zone. And is that something that you
We are not currently taking rural opportunity zone, but we believe the county below us is. I would honestly have to go and review the impact of how the counties have benefited from the rural opportunity zone to completely form my opinion on it, as I know that there are a lot of benefits. I know, especially with teachers, how if they work in rural opportunity zones, they get their college loans forgiven, and those aspects I am definitely in favor for, but I have to review the entire thing before I made a statement on it.
Thank you. There's actually, I introduced a bill just a week or two ago that would include Miami County in the rural opportunity zone, and I'm glad the representative said that. It does need to be looked at. We tend to pick winners and losers with these programs. This is one of them that I'm talking about. But I feel like if one county has it, then all counties should have it. So when the program started initially, for those of you that don't know, excuse me, when you moved in from out of state for 5 years, you would not pay state income tax. And then there was a $15,000 match that the local the county commissioners could participate in, and the state would match a portion of that. So, and some of the counties that are in the rural opportunity zone chose not to participate in the matching program. It was optional. When the program started, it was about 30 or 40 counties out west, and I expanded it, ran a motion when I was in the Senate to expand it any county that was 50,000 population or less. And a few have been added since then, and we've been trying to get Miami County and Franklin County also in the program. As far as I'm concerned, if it's a good program for the state, all counties should be in it.
I would just say that I am supportive, but we do need to verify some of what we've heard in reports in years past is not really being utilized. So what I don't want is, it sounds good, and I refer to this as a blue sky bill. It needs to do better than just look good and sound good. It needs to really be good, and it needs to be something that people really can use.
Thank you. That's the next one. I will start with you. And I'll just be honest, you have got with the question, all that are in essence surrounding the same topic, and it's almost the elephant in the room, and so I'm just going to go ahead and poke the elephant slightly. You brought it up in your comments, federal overreach. There's a lot of concern amongst many people regarding, and I'll just run down the list, election integrity, executive action from our current governor. We touched on some of the concerns regarding the judiciary. And so they all kind of boil down to the legislative power that you all set. You have legislative power vested to you, and so you're representative of us. And so there's a wide concern about what should our state legislature be doing to, in essence, keep everybody in their lane. And that can be whether it's we're concerned about our local officials running elections with integrity, whether it's our governor exercising some level of reasonable restraint, or maybe not. I would be lying if I said that the questions are not, for the most part, balanced on both sides of the issue. There are questions and concerns that think that the governor did what was appropriate regarding the executive order. There are concerns that the governor overstepped. So I'd be interested just in regards to keeping everybody in their lane, and this can be both from a federal perspective and from a state perspective. What can we be doing, or should we?
It is absolutely the issue of the day. And I touched on it a little bit, you're correct. But I will paraphrase President Reagan. We are only one generation away from losing our freedoms. And we have to fight for those freedoms. It's not, and I know we can't use the word fight anymore, but it is, we need to engage and we need to activate. We are being challenged on so many levels, the election process. And for those of you that don't think there was a fraudulent or gaming with the elections, I challenge you, watch the videos, watch them pulling boxes out in the middle of the night after some of the people left to count. I went and I've been spending hours on this so that we can introduce legislation in Kansas to help protect the integrity of our ballot. There are so many things, and we have courts that are overstepping. We have courts that are overstepping. We're a part-time legislature in Kansas, 90 days approximately every year. And then the locals are saying that we're overstepping because of the transparency bill. Well, the locals exist because of state legislation. We see the process working, we need to step in, and we need to help improve the process. As far as the governor goes and the administration and overreach, absolutely. Who would have thought Easter weekend the governor tries to shut down our churches? And then 4th of July, all of a sudden we have a mask mandate on 4th of July. And it just follow the pattern. And everything's all fine and dandy as long as we agree with the administration. But as soon as we start to disagree, they start throwing terms like partisan and, extremist or whatever words they're using for the day. But they're trying to make it look like, I guarantee you, how many in here agree with somebody 100% of the time? I love my husband. He is one of the best. But I don't even agree with him 100% of the time. We have to have the debate. That's where we get the best legislation and we get the best policy. So allow us to have the debate. And the legislature is going to have to step up. We're going to have to see some intestinal fortitude to stand up against not just the judicial, but the administrative overreach also, and the federal overreach.
So we are a system of checks and balances. We have the administrative or the executive branch, legislative branch, and the judicial branch. The legislative branch is meant to keep the administrative and the judicial branch in check and vice versa. But what it all boils down to, if we don't have election integrity, what good is it? I can tell you that the state of Kansas definitely has one of the most secure election systems, as long as the federal judge doesn't go and strike part of it down. We have a lot of different issues, whether it is electioneering, which I would say nationally that is much of a larger issue versus the state of Kansas. We do have a lot of good election law in Kansas, and I know that we have more going through to strengthen it more. But one of the biggest issues that we face specifically in Kansas is a Kansas Supreme Court that doesn't always put rulings down based on the law and the intent of the legislation, but rather on their political views. And you can see that when it comes to school finance, you can see that when that comes to abortion. And you can actually go and read the way that they've twisted the founding fathers and those who wrote our Kansas Constitution and picked and chose what words that they wanted. So definitely we need the House and the Senate to grow the backbone and to stand up. And I think we have it this year, and say no. Because the second that, if you look at the unemployment fraud and the spike in it, it hit October. At the same time that she threw out her second mask mandate. There are so many different aspects that you need to look at when it comes to executive orders, and it's time for the legislature to say no.
We really do have a problem with the checks and balances, and that is part of what makes being the United States so unique, is that we do have that check and balance, and we have the executive, we have the judicial, and then we have that legislative. And so we do have a problem with people staying in their lanes. We'll start at the federal level. We have a brand new United States president who is mirroring what our governor is doing, and that is executive orders. bypassing the legislative process. Something very real that will impact us, our state, and all states, is his extension of the census. You know, we did have an extension that President Trump put in place, and he gave a deadline, a hard deadline after that extension. We have a new president that extended it again to the end of January, and then extended it again with another executive order to the end of March. So our census is still not complete, and he expanded the definition of who would be included in that census. That has a very real impact on not only our state, but on the work of the legislature, because we will be working on redistricting. We're gonna have to wait until our new United States president decides what the real deadline is for census. I think it is important, however, that the legislature has to hold up to what is their responsibility. I think in DC that's going to be difficult, because now that we have one party that is controlling not only the executive branch, but the legislative branch, I think people are going to quickly realize that we will not, from a federal level, have that check and balance. But in our own state, when we were voting on the Kansas Emergency Act, it was inappropriate for us to just kick the deadline down the road, so to speak, to the end of March. Because quite frankly, there were some issues that should have gotten addressed that would address the overreach of our governor, of our executive branch. Because since she shut the legislature down last March, she has been a governor of executive orders to this extreme. She took bills that were sent to her by the legislature, vetoed them, then turned right around and cherry-picked portions of those bills that she did like and made them executive orders, so that she could have her moment with the press to prove, oh, I care about this issue. We have to hold the executive branch accountable. We did, I know it's been mentioned, value them both. The constitutional vote that will occur in August of 2022. That's because of the overreach of our judicial branch. They decided that they were going to reinterpret what is in our state constitutional Bill of Rights. They didn't come up with this on their own, however, and it's important for people to understand. There have been groups that have actually gone from state to state. This is a process. This is a domino effect process. They have gone state to state, and when they can't win with the legislature, they work with the judiciary. And so we are just one of a series of states where suddenly, through a state Supreme Court decision, they are reinterpreting the Bill of Rights. Abortion isn't a new issue. I think you guys are familiar with the Hippocratic Oath. That came from Hippocrates, about 400 BC. In the Hippocratic Oath that he wrote, he mentioned, I will not deliver a pessary, which is a full. It was a process, it was a procedure, so that a woman would abort a child. So this is not an issue of the 21st century. This is an issue that has been around for the ages. But somehow it was the state Supreme Court in 2019 that made this new discovery. It wasn't their new discovery. It was something that they got from the state of Tennessee. They got from a variety of other states where one by one they have worked to make the judiciary be progressive.
Senator, I hate to interrupt, and I apologize.
Go ahead.
We're running up against the clock, and so I wanted to give each of our legislators at least 5 minutes. And the final 5 minutes, thankfully there's people in the room smarter than me, and they provided a very good closing question. And it's what, we've talked about quite a bit already today, and I'm certain there are some things that we missed that are very important to you. And so for 5 minutes, if there's something that we've missed that you'd like to point out,
There are a couple things that I want us to focus on. I know in Senate Education, we've had several bills that we're working on that we think are important. We passed out a bill that is concurrent enrollment, and so that will probably be on the Senate floor on Tuesday. Senate Bill, I believe it's Senate Bill 32. And what that will do, it was a request of school districts. In this state, it is not legal for school districts to transfer funds to institutions of higher education. It will allow school districts to let their kids that are eligible take concurrent courses so they can earn high school credit as well as college credit. School districts can negotiate that contract with be it a community college, a university, public or private, as well as a technical college. And we feel that's going to help a lot of kids in our state who have family that just can't afford that tuition. It also, for the first time, includes and loops in our foster care kids that have not been able to get any funding for that concurrent enrollment. So that will be for free for them. Another bill that we have worked on, and it's Senate Bill 61, I believe, it will either be on the Senate floor later this week or the following week. But that has to do with the student scholarship. And that allows kids that would be eligible for either free or reduced lunch to be able to earn a scholarship to attend a school of their choice. Now, it had before been limited to just what was referred to as the 100 lowest performing elementary school kids. So it limited it to just kids that were in elementary, and it had to be on that list. What we've done is we've broadened it for middle and high school kids, and there's a reason for that. It's actually a twofold reason. The first reason was that, when this scholarship was first put into place, Randy Watson, who's the education commissioner, came up to me and said, why just elementary kids? Why isn't the scholarship available for middle school kids or high school kids before they graduate so that they can get caught up in a private setting? And so this includes them in the loop, but it also addresses what's happened to our high school kids and our middle school kids in particular, not in Miami County, but in many of our other counties in the state where they haven't been able to attend school, where they've been either virtual or hybrid and they've not had those full services that they need. It addresses that issue. We know that last year, almost every school district in the state allowed kids to graduate with just 21 credits. The norm that the State Board of Education put in is that it needed to be 28 credits, so they ratcheted that down by 7 credits. We've been told that they've made that ask again for this year, and we just can't have kids graduating with such low number of credits. So we're working on that. We're also going to, one last thing, work on guidelines for at-risk kids. So the checklist for what qualifies for an at-risk kid and how those funds will be spent is going to be addressed by the education committee as well. Thank you.
Representative Clark.
Thank you. One issue that I think had not been fully dug into is actually the unemployment issue that the state's facing and the liability that is put on people and businesses. And I think that's one thing that everyone here needs to be made aware of specifically. Kansas right now is responsible for over 9% of all unemployment claims in the United States, but our population is less than 1% of the United States. The Unemployment Trust Fund had over $1 billion in reserve, and it is now somewhere between $300 million and $400 million. That means that trust fund is funded by businesses, by school districts. And the unemployment fraud, there's one specific school district in Topeka that they were billed $775,000 in unemployment fraud claims, and they only actually had 3 confirmed people who were on unemployment when they had over 400 people who had fraudulent claims put out in their name. So that is one issue that I think we need to address specifically. We need to find a way to make sure those of you that are receiving 1099s that never filed unemployment get a new 1099 that says that you didn't get it. We need to find a way to not hold you liable and not hold businesses liable and not hold school districts liable for the issue that has been caused by the governor and her administration when it comes to this. And that is one bill that I'm more than proud to support, and that was House Bill 2195, and that is making sure that Kansans are not held liable for the inability to effectively and properly ensure that our unemployment system is being used in accordance to how it should be. And that's one thing, I think that's the most important thing that we can address right now.
Thank you. Thank you, and I thank Representative Potter. That was on my list at the top item. The money that was brought in federal money. Some of that money could have been used to shore up the unemployment system and to actually develop a new system. And it wasn't done. It wasn't made a priority. Instead, this administration is proposing that we borrow money from the federal government in order to take care of that obligation. We've got to start putting our priorities. We've got to put our money where our mouth is. And if we really think this system, then use that federal money that's coming the third time to shore up that system, that unemployment fund and the software and the IT. And that leads me to a couple other issues that we've got, a privacy issue and identity theft. Identity theft is a huge issue. If individual companies or government wants to gather your data, then they should be obligated to protect the data. We probably won't see legislation this year, but I am working on it with a few other legislators, and we must get that done. We need to give the tools and resources in order to go after the fraud and to protect you when it does happen so that you're not obligated. Part of the transparency bill, I said there was 4 major items. One of the items is that if you have identity theft and the person had financial gain, then you do not owe the income tax on it. You are not obligated. But right now, you currently do have to check with the Department of Labor if that's where the identity theft came through and get a new 1099 issued, so you will not be obligated. But we will clarify that in that statute if that bill becomes law. I hope it does. The other thing is vaccines. I don't want to be mandated vaccines, and with all the talk right now, there's, could we be obligated to have a vaccine card before we're able to enter a store or a business? I mean, this is big government. Who would have dreamed, if you would have wrote a science fiction novel or movie, nobody would have believed that this was going on. We had a doctor on the Senate floor this week that said, for some people, this is no worse than a cold. Now, others, it is a very serious thing to matter, but so is the flu and pneumonia, and we need to treat that seriously too. But we've got to get back the shutdown, the governor shutting down the businesses and the state. The fallout is much greater than what people know. And we have people that are struggling and trying to make ends meet, businesses that aren't able to meet their property tax obligations. We've got to take all this into consideration as we legislate. I would recommend, we are going to be debating Senate Bill 22. It's an income tax bill. It's being, by the administration, it's saying it's another tax cut. It's reckless. It's, just like I hate to use the term, but Brownback 2.0. That isn't accurate, and that soundbite isn't accurate either. I would challenge that President Morris is on her tax committee, and he was the president of the Senate when that bill passed, and the bill came out of the Senate and passed the House, and the governor signed it into law. So there's ownership in many places, not just one. But what's going to happen on Senate Bill 22 is we had federal tax cuts in 2017 that inadvertently caused tax increases for some Kansans. And so this bill, the majority of it, would allow you the option to itemize, because if you don't itemize on your federal, you cannot itemize on your state income tax return. And the federal increased standard deductions considerably, so most people are caught in that window. There is a portion for corporations, about a fourth of it, but it is good legislation that will be debating. Don't believe the sound bite that it is 2.0. That tax money was meant for your pocket, not to grow Kansas government. I want to thank you guys today, thank our sponsors, thank all of you for being here. Really appreciate engagement, team effort, and you know, we are a government of the people, and we're your neighbors. So we want to hear from you, and we want to engage. Thank you.
I would just like to close up. Thank you guys for the job that you did. I did print off just the summary of the bills that you currently have before both houses. And just the summary was 29 pages. And then the legislative actions that were just attached to them is 101 pages. Thank you guys for the job that you do representing us in the state legislature. With that, I will close. I would like to thank the Chamber of Commerce for allowing me to do this this year.
Thank you very much, Raymond. A couple things to take with you as you go. The legislative series continues on the next couple weekends throughout Miami County. It'll be in Osawatomie next week, Spring Hill the following, and Paola after that. So if you have questions or you'd like to hear some additional information, that will be out there, again, live streamed as well. Thank you, Middle School, for the live stream. And then don't forget to pick up the new Miami County book up top too. It's got a lot of great information in it. We tried to get a bio about Raymond in the middle of it, but it just didn't fit. So we'll get that next time. But Miami County, pick that up. And thank you so much for being out with us today. We had some people join us on the live stream. I was watching that as well. And so it was a great turnout. We appreciate you being involved too, and have a great day.